City. Oh,
Sorry.
okay. And yes, everyone, welcome to Cracking a Product Design Interview. We're really excited to have you with us today. And basically, this is a partnered event with Products by Women. So you'll be hearing from us at the end of the week for the event follow-up email, along with ways to get involved with both of our communities and the recording, of course. So we're going to dive into what GA is about in case you've never heard of us. We are a global tech and business school, and right now we have upwards of 40 campuses around the world. And we started reopen just a couple of them in the US. For New York City, it might be later this year or early next year. Definitely stay tuned. But essentially, our biggest goal is to help individuals like y'all to get involved with our communities and be able to have open conversations like this to get into the career that you want to be in. And on top of it, we do have one-off workshops and classes along with part-time, full-time courses related to UX design, data, business, career development, coding, and marketing. And so when it comes to product, of course, that falls under business. But yeah, I can't wait to hear today's conversation. And then some other plugs I wanted to share is that we are in Hispanic Heritage Month. So we're doing lots to celebrate the widespread diversity of community that we have. And on the right-hand side, I'm just so proud of the colleagues that I have who have put together Spanish-focused workshops. So like Excel workshops that we typically have in English, we are offering it in Spanish. So definitely sign up and share with your friends and family. And then we're also giving 10% off our part-time courses for just the September month in part of celebrating our 10-year anniversary. And lastly, we've got 50% off code with Bootcamp 50, which I'll include in our follow-up email of ways you can get involved with our workshops just to learn more and gain some new skills. And of course, this is being recorded. There's a chat for anybody who would like to share your thoughts or just commentary throughout. And again, tag us at General Assembly and at Products by Women if you would like to share your experience. And now I'm going to hand it back to Nimisha. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Angela. Again, just wanted to reiterate the housekeeping. This event is being recorded, so don't worry about taking notes. We will be sharing this entire session via our YouTube channel, so sit back and enjoy. Please do feel free to drop your questions in the chat box, and we will try to get to them at the end of the session. We also have a bunch of collab opportunities, including opportunities to host and speak in upcoming webinars. So feel free to reach out to us at info@productsbywomen.com. With that, I'd love to introduce our guest of honor, Nishtha, who's also a good friend of mine. And we actually met through Meetup, which is where Products by Women was born. She worked at Meetup, and actually our roots also go back to, Nishtha being a major contributor of our branding. Everything that you see with Products by Women, all the branding is something that she has contributed to, and she, set us into this direction. So really thank you, Nishtha, for that. She's also the author of the design interview. I just cannot stop. I guess she just does way too much. So Nishtha, I'd love for you to start with your own introduction, and then we'll jump into some questions that I have prepared, and then some questions from our attendees today.
Thank you so much, Nimisha. I can say the same about you, to be honest. I feel like that's also why we connect. We just do a lot all the time. I am Nishtha, like Nimisha was too kind to say. I am of many things. I am writing a book called The Product Design Interview, kind of like cracking the coding interview, but for design. But I am also, of course, a self-taught product designer. I taught myself how to do design when I was in school, and kind of in the middle of being an engineer, which most people were. And I decided, I'm like, actually, I like what the designers are doing. And so I taught myself how to do design and graduated out of college into like my first quote unquote tech job at Intuit. I was a product designer at Mint, and from there kind of moved, and I interview a lot, and that's kind of why this book is happening. From there, I went to OkCupid, which is when I moved to New York. And after that, I was at Meetup, and most recently I am at Etsy. And like I said, I interview a ton, I evaluate a ton of companies as I'm interviewing, and I'm really, really excited to kind of share this journey with y'all.
I had no clue until this date that you're a self-taught designer, Nishtha. I had no clue about that. I mean, speaking about that, talk to me about, whether skills and like going to school is kind of overrated. And do you feel like teaching yourself any skill and, being able to become a really good product designer is something that you're a great example of that. But talk to me about like how this came about, how you taught yourself how to be a good product designer, and what landed you to Etsy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I have just started to add back into my intro, that I'm a self-taught product designer. I was very like ashamed and conscious about it because it is really hard to break into design without that formal education. And I feel like it's getting harder the more like UX programs are out there in colleges. I was, like I said, I started out being an engineer, like a front-end engineer, and I worked really closely with designers at Oracle, which is where I was co-oping. And I really enjoyed what they did. And so I asked her, I'm like, how do I do what you do? And she's like, well, I'm a designer. And like, I went to school for graphic design and like, you know, the thing. And so I went back to school and I was like, how do I study this? And it was a mix of, it would take really long if I changed my major, it would be really expensive. And so I kind of sought out the next best option, which was I had a professor at my college, I went to Drexel, who had just come in from Carnegie Mellon, having gotten her PhD in human computer interaction. And I was like, check. I need to figure out how to get this thing going. And so I showed up at her office door, maybe on her second day. All her stuff was in boxes. And I was like, hi, welcome to Drexel. I want to learn design. Can I learn it from you? And she's like, that's great. I'm starting a research lab and we need exactly one designer and you can be it. And so I worked with her as the only designer to her research lab. And this is obviously atypical. I think it's a really, really rare opportunity. And it's really hard to find something like that, which is where I think programs like GA come in, or just generally finding resources can help. But for me, it was just like hanging out with a ton of researchers and being like, how do I make a design out of whatever is here, and like actually pushing it out to like small prototype groups for the research. And so that's how I learned.
Absolutely love that. And I think there are two main core skills, which I think I take away and is a common denominator for someone who's able to kind of make those pivots. Is one is being able to ask and being, really giving back and volunteering, both of which you've done like beautifully. As I've seen you grow into these roles of like at Etsy and everything else that you do. But let's talk a little bit about you being so multifaceted. You have a full-time job, you are a founder of a couple of projects actually, and you're an author. Talk to me about the importance of like side hustles, and especially now after COVID. A lot of people have been impacted by losing a job or being underemployed. And so I really want to pause here and talk about the importance of skills and the importance of side hustles. Like how did you navigate this entire space?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of the side hustles ironically are because I was and I still am always seeking projects, because I am, like I said, self-taught. And so every project you do is a portfolio piece as well. But also the more I really enjoy product. And so it's been one of those ways for me to channel all of the things, because work, as much as every place is great, there's always going to be things that didn't ship because you maybe didn't advocate for it enough, maybe you did and it didn't. And like you're always thinking like, these were my instincts, I wonder how it would play out. And it's one of the ways to validate your instincts in the real world, where you are the ultimate decision maker. And so if it fails, it's on you, but if it succeeds, it's also on you. And it's been a great way for me to channel that kind of wonder what would happen through these like startups or companies.
Yeah, and it's also a great way to kind of like channel your curiosity, your creativity, and just kind of go for it. So I love that. Talk to me about Etsy. What does your day really look like as a product designer at Etsy? Like from morning, like 9 to 6 or 9 to 7, as they call it during COVID. Like is there work-life balance? Is there no work-life balance? What does your typical day really look like?
Honestly, really, really chill. So here's the thing. I think work-life balance is one of the things I've been so amazed at Etsy. You said 9 a.m. and my eyebrows went up because like we start work at 10. uh, and starting work, it really depends, right? So for me as a designer, what I do every day, I wake up, I have like a few things I'm working on. So I like log on, there's not a ton of meetings on most days. We also have what we call company-wide focus days. So the entire company just doesn't have meetings. We also have company-wide focus weeks. So like a few weeks ago, none of us had any meetings and it was fabulous. So we have those pockets, but on the days we do have meetings, I'm usually talking a whole lot with my product manager in the early phases of design, talking a lot with our research partners, which are both analytics as well as like qualitative research, to understand whether we're solving the right problem, how well we're getting at the solution. We're a huge experimentation culture. And so we talk a lot about exactly what we're measuring and what we think the impact will be, not just like when we ship something, but over 30 days or 6 months or 1 year. And we really look for those types of insights. So it's really challenging to think about what this is doing, what you're working on is doing in the long term. A lot of the times, I know when you think about a design job, you're like, I'm going to hang out in Figma and sketch all day. That is not really the case. You have, of course, days where you really need to like figure something out and like go at it. But a lot of the times it's a mix of documents and like collaborating and a lot of decks and like explaining and really selling what you're working on internally and getting feedback on it as well.
I love that. Me on the other side, on the contrary, I work at an agency and I feel like it's very different and the pace is so different from Etsy. It's go, 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 go. And literally, like I was telling you, I'm in between a release, guys. After this, I'm going back to a release. So it's pretty wild. Speaking about that, the company that I work at, Huge, is actively hiring. So feel free to reach out to me if there's anything that you're interested in that you see at naimisha@productsbywomen.com. Similarly, if you see anything at Etsy, I'm going to take the liberty to say, reach out to Nishtha on LinkedIn. And like I'm sure she'll be happy to kind of navigate or like offer some advice there. Talk to me about, how you, prep to get this role at Etsy, speaking about product design interviews and you being like having interviewed across in many leading tech companies. What was your process? How did you prep, prior to the interview? What was your process during the interview process? Like, how did you kind of, go through those rituals or prepare yourself mentally and then after? So let's break that down. What was your process prior to, starting this journey of interviews?
So great question. It is a journey. It takes a while. And so I think before I start interviewing, first you have to know you're going to start interviewing. And then if you're fortunate enough, which I believe I was very privileged to be able to sit down and say, where do I want to work, and make a list of things that are important to me. So and it's really, really hard. I was just joking with someone. I'm like, you have to actively try today to not work at Facebook or Google. Like you have to like put in energy to not do that, because it's so easy to get into those interview loops and you're giving it your all. And then you're like, but wow, I work at Facebook now. But do I want this? And so for me, it started with really thinking about what I want my next role to be and what I don't want it to be. I didn't want to be one of 300, 500 designers. That was too big of a jump for me, honestly, kind of scary. And also I felt like I still wanted to be in a position where I could open up the product and see my work. And I have a lot of friends at a lot of the bigger companies who do miss that. And so I wasn't ready to give that up yet. So making that list was one. The next thing is, of course, your portfolio. You have to have one on the internet, ideally, without a password, ideally, or like have a password easily available. And really putting those case studies together gets you in that mode, right? You are starting to think about your narrative. You're starting to think about the kind of work you've done. If you want to do more of it, if you want to do something different, I think it's a good reflection point as you start making your portfolio of like, wow, I've done this before. Do I really want to do this exact type of project again or this exact type of space? For me, I'm not over marketplaces just yet. I was at OkCupid, which is dark, but it's still a marketplace for people. And Meetup is a marketplace for events. And I was like, okay, it's time to still like stay in the space, but go a little broader into like e-commerce and retail, but still, I think Etsy in a lot of ways was like Meetup, where the sellers and organizers are similar. Similarly, I interviewed at Shopify because I know like e-commerce is where the future is headed, and Airbnb, which is again a similar kind of marketplace. And so those were really my top contenders for where I would interview. Of course, like the COVID wave had me interviewing at like Stripe and Square and all of those. But really, the other thing I wanted to, and we'll talk about comp later, but I really wanted to work for a public company because it does change your comp structure. And I think that was really, really important. I know I should have maybe waited for Airbnb to go public, but you know, it's just, again, you have to really decide what you're looking for and how much risk you're willing to take.
I love that. I want to spend some more time and unpack each of these elements that you've just done. Talk to me about case studies, right? Like what resources did you use for the design challenges, for case studies? Are there specific websites, or is there a book that you refer to? Are there people you refer to? Was it Glassdoor? Was it like, what did you use?
So for case studies on my portfolio, I already had a format. What I was doing towards the end at Meetup was interviewing design candidates. So I was like deep into portfolio. So I was just looking at a bunch of different people's portfolios, and I had mine already done. And so I had a good enough format where I was like, oh yeah, this is successful as a hiring manager. These are the things I'm looking for. And so I feel like I had that leg up going into this like round of interviews before I got to Etsy, is that I was hiring for a very similar roles and multiple of them. And so it was, I got to put on the hiring manager hat and say, passwords are annoying. Let's not have them, because I'm like, I'll get to this portfolio later. Or having really low fidelity screens is annoying because I'm like zooming in and like really squinting. Or for example, seeing a bunch of different projects on a grid instead of like interactive, like full screen, project A, project B, project C. It doesn't give you a holistic idea of the types of projects the designer has worked on. And so having a grid to show you the breadth was something I really liked in certain portfolios. So I was like, okay, this is how I assess. So I'm hoping other people assess it this way, and turns out they do.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes we forget, like, the other person sitting across the table is a person. And it's really important to kind of take a step back and think about what are some things that you will look for in a resume, in a portfolio, in a case study. And go from there. Speaking about skill sets, since you've been on both the sides, which is like in capacity of a hiring manager and somebody who's interviewed, a lot, what are some skills a product designer must have or must highlight through an interview process?
So I think the interview process is honestly oddly different from making your portfolio, because you are working on it. The first one is basically, here's all the things I'm capable of. And the second part, the interview itself, is how comfortable you are talking about the things you're working on, accepting that there are pitfalls to whatever it is you worked on, showing your ability to work with different partners. All of that is rarely translated through a portfolio, but through an interview, it's definitely there. But I think those are the skills right there, really being able to manage your stakeholders, which many jobs do have it. But the thing about design is everyone thinks they can design. And so being able to manage that is really, really challenging. Sorry, the train is really loud.
New York things, it's totally fine.
There you go. It has left. So I think managing stakeholders is one. Being able to really tell a story with your designs, because oftentimes if you don't try hard enough, it comes off as someone told you to design something and you did it, as opposed to really thinking about it, talking through the process, why you did certain things, why you went in a certain direction, all of those things. Communicating that is really important. And then I think the last thing I would say is some type of like, not necessarily experience or background, but the ability to understand research and be able to conduct some of it. Because in a lot of places, even though you have a bunch of researchers as a designer, if you're not close to the research, your product is just not going to be the same. And I think exhibiting that in an interview is super important.
And I love that part, which is, you kind of stressed upon that, it may come across as though somebody asked you to design this and you just design it. And, it's a really important skill for a designer to have. And it's working in an agency. I always encourage my team, especially designers, to always challenge clients, because and the way to do that is through data, right? Like, what is your goal? And if you are looking at conversion, then this design will work for you. And kind of managing those expectations and working with clients or whoever it is, your stakeholders, is extremely important. So I love that you stressed upon that, and I think it's a very important part. Now, moving on to my most favorite part, which is salary. I think oftentimes we don't really speak about this in a lot of in our prior sessions, but we've been trying to make this a space for everybody to kind of talk about salary ranges. How can one kind of negotiate in a more educated manner going into interviews? And what has your experience been since you've actually gone through the process? What are some areas that one can negotiate, the different elements, whether it's PT or whether it's the RSUs, whether it's, I don't know, your healthcare, or like what's been your process?
Negotiating is hard. And because this is a safe space for women, it's really, really hard for women. I think we've been taught for so long to accept what we're given and be grateful for it, that it's honestly, and I still say this, it's an out of body experience for me when I'm negotiating. Like, I just think back after the conversation, I'm like, what am I saying? And if you work in tech, what are these numbers? They're crazy, but we're not supposed to think they're crazy because no one else is thinking they're crazy, but they are crazy. And so my experience has been really, I think competing offers is the best route if you can. That's what I do, because it's easier to be like, someone else thinks so, rather than saying I think so. Not ideal. Ideally, you are able to say you think so. If you have another offer to back it up, even better. So for me, I usually try competing offers, but there is a lot of information out at this time. Like Glassdoor, I would say, has gotten a little out of date. I think levels.fyi is one of those that has been a lot more accurate. Candor is really up there, getting those RSU numbers. Do your research and then bump it by 10%. That's what I would say. When you're negotiating, I think one of the things that I always try to do is, recruiters out there, they're great, but they also work for the company. They don't work for you. Yes. Nishtha, should I post it? Oh, there. And so you have to remember that recruiters are going to try to get you to just say yes on the phone. Never say yes on the first offer ever at all, even if you really want it. The first offer is the worst case. And so anything you can negotiate from there, great. If you can't, they're not going to retract it because you're negotiating. I know that's a fear, but it hasn't happened, at least to me, and I've done this a ton. And then the next thing I think is, here are the numbers, ask for key components. And so the key components are, of course, your base salary, restricted stock units, which are probably for public companies, options, which are very different from stocks. So don't let them gloss it over. Really, really ask if it's options or stocks. Ask about the vesting schedule. So that's another thing where if the company, for whatever reason, only vests yearly and not quarterly, you have to wait the whole year to get not just your first chunk, but every year after. There's other companies out there that are doing quarterly. Some companies are doing monthly. The new trend is to not have cliffs at all. I know Uber, DoorDash, Robinhood, they're just not having cliffs, which is pretty impressive. And if you can negotiate that for yourself, definitely go for that. And then there's all these other components like a sign-on bonus, which honestly, it sounds really appealing. And if it is for your situation, go for it. But between the tax and like what it does to your total annual compensation over the years, is not great. You'd rather get it in the base, even if it's less. So I did the math somewhere, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but if you got 100 grand in base salary and a 10 grand in a sign-on bonus, the next year you're not going to get that 10 grand. And your annual like inflation adjustment, just assume you don't get a bonus or anything else, is going to be like 1%, 2%. So now you're at a 102. If you got 105 instead of the 10 grand in bonus in the sign-on bonus as your base salary, now you're increasing off of the 105, which is again much higher. All of your bonuses, all of your performance incentives are going to be based off of your base salary. So it is in your interest to try to get that as high up as possible, even if you let go of the sign-on bonus, even though that's like the short-term gratification situation.
This is so revealing. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think, in my previous chat with Alex, she did add on one additional resource, which is H1B data, which is amazing.
H1bdata.info, yes, which is all of our immigrant salaries out there.
I know, which is incredible. But, you spoke about like something very important, which is about how, we are expected to be grateful, and especially as immigrants. And it's been culturally kind of embedded for us to kind of think that always be grateful for what you receive. And it's something that we've had to unlearn and teach ourselves, saying, no, I deserve better. If everyone else, so should I, right? Like, so, no, thank you for sharing that. And guys, I see a bunch of questions coming in. Feel free to drop those questions and we'll take them at the end. Now let's talk a little bit more about resources. I mean, what are you listening to? Is there any podcasts? Of course, your book's coming up. So talk to us a little bit about your book. When is it releasing? Where can someone purchase it? And anything else that you're listening to, watching, or any other communities you suggest?
Absolutely. So I am writing the book. I am actually in the editing phase. So I have really crappy chapters. If anyone's interested, I can send them to you. But for the bigger companies that I did interview in this last wave, I actually somehow retained it in my memory. And like at the beginning of this year, I just dumped it all in a few guides. And so those are up. You can buy them. There's Airbnb, Spotify, Facebook. There should be one more that I can't remember. Maybe Stripe, maybe Shopify. There's a couple up there. I have not looked at them in a while, clearly.
I just want to know, did you crack all of those interviews?
Spotify, yes. Facebook, yes. And then I'm trying to remember if I didn't crack Google, but I don't think I wrote it up because it was a while ago. But a lot, Shopify, yes. I think I said that, like Shopify, Spotify, and what others? I'm like totally blanking.
Airbnb.
I don't know if Airbnb, I think I did Airbnb, there was a leveling situation, so I don't like consider it cracked. But then there's others like Flatiron Health, which also I should be writing up soon because I know it's in that design sprint book and a lot of designers really like Flatiron Health. And that was a really, really hard interview. I was very satisfied when I got that offer. I should be putting that up soon, but yeah.
I love that. I mean, at a time where people are struggling with finding like one interview, you're like cracking every single thing that's coming your way. So guys, you must purchase this book when it becomes available, because trust me, Nishtha always puts like her best foot forward. So yeah, hopefully Nishtha, share it with us when it becomes live. But there are a bunch of questions which are coming in here. Which is, specific to the salary part. Like, is there a way to calculate those base salaries and incentives? Do you know of any resources there?
I don't know of resources, and I've been spreadsheeting a lot, and so I might just like put it up on my website or something. But I think what you should be going for is the total annual comp, like I said. And if you want like a order of preference on what to negotiate, obviously, if you don't need money day to day, it would be stock options. If not, like RSUs. If not, then it should be base, RSUs, anything else, and then your sign-on bonus. Even if you can up your performance incentive, most companies will say 10. I haven't seen any other company other than Intuit that is like actually moved that to like maybe 12% or whatever, but maybe there's companies out there that do it. The standard is 10. But yeah, I would say like start with whatever will grow with you as opposed to one-time bonuses.
Love that. And I think you should like put together like a spreadsheet or create another app or something like that. But thinking about that, how do you apply for these positions? Do you go to LinkedIn? Do you ask for referral? Or do recruiters reach out to you? If they reach out to you, is your LinkedIn optimized?
I would not take my advice because I feel like I'm very like, I don't know what like targeting bucket I am, and I do get reached out, and then a lot of the times I've just applied on the website. If you can, you should get a referral. Absolutely. The best way to get an interview is through a referral because it does go to the top of the stack. LinkedIn, I know you're supposed, again, I don't think I'm the best person to like share what's working because I don't know, like my LinkedIn, it's public. I don't write a lot of information about what I've done in every job, but I do keep it up to date. I have a picture, I have a title, I have the skills in. But I think it's really, once you have your resume and portfolio together, like start sending it out, see what's, and like maybe A/B test it a little bit. That's what I did when I was first starting out, is really changing up certain words to be like, this company is looking for more, I don't know, like personal finance experience. So I'm going to highlight my personal finance project higher on my resume than like my actual work experience. So like really doing those tiny tailoring things might help in the beginning.
I love that. And then Alex asks a question related to, what about people who are like starting off? Like, how do you negotiate with no experience and trying to land, your first job?
So I think by the time you get to the negotiation stage, you know that the company is really interested in you, and you should really internalize that. Like, they are not doing you a favor by sending you that offer. They've probably been hiring a really long time too. And honestly, both sides are just as relieved when an offer goes out. So it's not just you. They're also like, oh my God, the offer's out. Let's really hope they accept. So at that point, however hard it was to get to that point, just like try to forget it all, which I know is really hard because interviewing I can swear I did over 50 interviews before I got my first job at Intuit. It was awful. But by the time you get it, you need to realize that the interviewing is over. And so go in with that mindset. For your first job, definitely ask around, like friends, forums, all of these resources, and try to ground your argument in market rate. I always say, talk to the recruiters on the phone, listen to the numbers, don't say yes or no, and then email them back with what they said and what you think you want. And that's the best way to kind of give yourself the headspace, not get really like bullied by the recruiter into saying yes or into agreeing to a number. And always be like, I would like it in writing, and just email them back saying, hey, here's the details I got from you. Here's what I think makes sense. Here's the research. Happy to chat more, or let me know what the team can do.
I love that. And so those were my prepared questions. I want to see if anybody has anything. Feel free to raise your hand. I'm happy to unmute you. Yeah, I mean, if all right, let's see. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to unmute you. But, while there are some questions coming in, Nishtha, how have you been unplugging through COVID? Like, let's talk about what you do for fun, like apart from writing, apart from, working on side projects, passion projects, founding companies. Like, what do you do for fun? Do you?
What do I do for fun? I eat a lot, like a lot. So I'm always eating at the next place. And so that's been something this year, of course, last year was harder. This year I've been traveling a fair bit just to like get out of all of the craziness. And that's been really nice. I know you asked about podcasts. I don't think you want my recommendations. I listen to medical journals. So there's that. I don't know if that's very design relevant. And I watch a lot of TV. Like I say I operate at the end of television. I've pretty much watched everything that's coming out.
Awesome. And so when is your book coming out, and how can anybody sign up for an alert?
The alerts are, you can go to nishtadalal.com/ the product design interview, I can share a link in here after. Or you can go to nishtadalal.com and then there's a link somewhere on the top right. When is it coming out? Depends on how quickly I edit it. I'm scared to commit to a date, but sometime next year is what I'll say.
I love that. And yeah, so we're at 7:36. Seems like there are no other questions coming in. And I know I did promise you that we'll try to close out a bit earlier today. Nishtha, thank you so much. I mean, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. And you just I don't know, a box of like so much knowledge. I feel like we need to have more sessions like these to unpack more and more. Again, everybody, please do reach out to Nishtha. How do you usually handle answering back on offers? I guess there's another question which came in about specifically, answering back on offers and when other interviews are going on. Yeah, when you're interviewing in tandem with like other places, like how do you kind of like, we'll take that last question and then we'll close out, but like how do you kind of juggle those things?
Of course, that happens all the time. So what I essentially do, and sometimes I've like really pushed the limit with it, because like I said, I like to have a competing offer as I'm going into other interviews, like towards the end stages. I'm like really transparent. I'm like, hey, I'm seeing through this other interview process. I really want to make the right decision for me and you, and get a deadline that way. But also at the same time, the companies I'm interviewing with, I'll let them know that I have an offer on the table, which makes them like, oh my God, this person really is interested. So it's in your best interest to let the company that you're interviewing with know you have an offer, and then also ask them to expedite the process a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you. And any parting words for those aspiring product designers? Like, what's your advice for someone who's been trying and hasn't had a lot of luck recently? What's something that you'd like to say before you leave?
Interviewing is hard. It's really, really hard, I think. And I can tell you from having been on both sides, like when you don't get that job or when you get turned down, like there's a very, 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 very small, like almost no reason why it was actually about you. It was just about what the team needed, there's so many things that like could be timing, it could be what the team needed, it could be that some other candidate was so much far ahead in the process, it could be that the team is just tired of interviewing and is taking a break. There could be a variety of reasons that are not about you. It's so easy to get discouraged. I like to think of, and also these are like really grueling on sites. I'm glad they're remote now, but it's still grueling. It's like you spend a day and a half just like at someone's office. And I think the best way that I've been approaching this since I started having good luck with it is that I just approach it like, this is a conversation. I basically work here. Like when I interviewed at Spotify, it was literally from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So I just walked in. I'm like, I work here. These people are here to talk to me. They will ask me questions and just approach it like that. I think it'll make it easier on yourself and on the other side, because your anxious energy does come off. And it's so hard as an interviewer to have a conversation when you know the other person's really stressed. So it goes both ways. Just like walk in like it's a conversation. May go well, may not go well. There's only so much you can do.
I love that. I mean, I think a lot of times I walk into an interview more stressed than the candidates. So about the energy piece, yes, I think it's really important to be calm and just go in with that mindset. So it's as much as the other person's trying to make you feel comfortable, you need to make the other person feel comfortable as well. Thank you, Nishtha. And really, again, I mean, thank you so much for spending your Tuesday evening with us. And this recording is going to be going live in like a few days on YouTube, and we'll share all of this information, via an email. So stay tuned and follow us on Instagram, follow us everywhere. Check out our website, productsbywomen.com, for more events like this. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you so much, Nisha.
Bye. See you.